Okay, class, today we're doing a garden tour. I wanted you to see some interesting and creative gardens around this area, and so today we're looking at one here in central Chino Valley. And so here is a garden and some ideas that you could take from this. Okay, in this area, they're using this material, and they're using this quite a bit, and I haven't seen this before. This is actually called hog paneling or cattle paneling. They use it in the animal industry. And so they've made these hoops with these lengths, and underneath here they have their tomatoes growing. And so what they can do is they can cover this at different times with shade cloth or potentially with plastic if they wanted to get some extension to the season. And so you see lots of squash. Actually, here's an example of this hog paneling with the squashes twined up on it, and you'll actually see some pretty good size fruit here, and there's no problem here with the weight being supported, and they're maximizing the space here in this garden with this paneling. Here is a nice batch of lemon cucumbers climbing up this paneling. So we still got about another month or two at least before freeze comes, and I'm expecting these cucumbers to have totally covered this. And so here you see the fruit. You want to pick lemon cucumbers when they're young like this, but it's also easy to harvest, easy to see. The owner of this garden reports that they can keep an eye on insects and disease easily in this setup. Another thing you notice in this garden is not a lot of weeds, and the result of that success is because they've put a thick layer of mulch down here covering the soil. And so mulch needs to cover the soil, not be worked in. Over time it will release nutrients down in, but mostly it's conserving moisture and suppressing the weeds, keeping the weeds from being able to germinate in this coarseness. She reports that when she does see weeds, she can get on top of them, and it's not a overwhelming situation because of how extensively this area is mulched. Here's a nice corn crop growing in heavily mulched soils, and you see lots of success here, lots of healthy growth. And this garden, for nutrient management, they brought in a lot of manures here first and worked that into the soil, and then throughout the season they're adding fish emulsion individually to each plant. Here's some peppers growing up, and they have these staked here to support them. And then they were growing potatoes, and they created this neat little hoop with a that's actually a PEX pipe. The PEX pipe then is covered with a little bit of frost cloth, floating row cover, which we'll talk extensively about. But the potatoes are doing much better with this light reduction that results under here. Defining this area too, this is their garden area. They have some really beautiful cut flowers, and they reported that some of these actually they purchased at the plant sale from Yavapai College. So nice little plug for and my classes. I can't fail to mention gardens that are beautiful, but then integrated with animals as well. And so you'll see the chickens here in this area coming to see. They think I have something to feed. But the owner of this area they call this their orchard area, and they have chickens are just doing their thing, making manure, getting rid of insects, and then they'll plant more trees into this area. Here's a beautiful entry covered with grapes, again purchased from student-grown grapes from the YC plant sale. Another plug for YC students. Just a beautiful garden area. What a setting. Grapes lining all the back here. Heavy mulches on the ground to keep weeds from being a problem. Mint plant flowing out from underneath the plum trees here. And then raised beds with strawberries in these nice raised bed planters. Surrounded by more fruit trees and seating areas. I thought this should be seen. And again, they're using that. There's wood slat fencing there, but you also see the hog panel fencing tied to the wood stakes. Here's two really neat structures that was reported to me that they can grow year-round in these, but what they've decided to do is make these the summer growing areas. So these are just cold frame hoop houses. Covering the frame is weed fabric, a weed cloth, so that cuts the heat and then the air moves through that, and so hot air is escaping out of there. What they're going to do in the wintertime is build the same exact structure, has a nice door on it, and then they're going to cover it with plastic and then have a little space heater in there that'll kick on a thermostat. But these ones here, it was reported that they can grow all the way through winter in the growing season with just this small heating unit here, but again, not with the fabric. They used to take the fabric off and then cover with plastic. And so nice growing beds here with tomatoes that they grew year-round, and then actually they raised baby chicks in here in the spring after they took the tomato crops out. And then to provide some thermal mass in between these greenhouses, there's raised planting beds in between on either side. And these are budded right up straight against this shade cloth greenhouse. Here's raspberry crops, blackberry crops, all trellised up on this hog paneling, and then covering it all, there's a shade cloth structure. And so this shade cloth structure is cutting the sun intensity, and you see benefit in the growing and ripening fruit. Here's some thornless blackberry variety with some beautiful fruit ripening on there. And they're trellised up nice. Next year they can select the new canes to attach to the fence, and it's easy to cut everything up. Otherwise, your blackberries can just become a huge nightmare, a mess. This is a very structured, manageable system where you can actually harvest the berries. Here to the side, we got another nice seating area. This is a beautiful place. I think they're going to end up doing events, weddings and stuff here. And they have a beautiful, just a simple horse trough or cattle trough, and they filled it with water lilies. There's some koi, some comets, goldfish, water plants, and then a filtering system that's bringing the water back. And all this is run, this can be off-grid because they're running to a solar panel here that is controlling the electricity to the fountain, keeping it circulating and keeping the water moving. At this garden, there's some beautiful apple trees that were left to grow 10 or 12 years, and it was determined they were getting too large, and so they started shaping those, opening the centers, and keeping them from being up too tall. So you almost find this thick trunk, but almost a shorter top than normal because they're managing it in a way to keep the fruit down where it's easier to be picked. They report the same issues here as many places in Yavapai County. A lot of times these apples and these peaches and plums, they're blooming out early, and then they're getting hammered by late freezes, at least in April and sometimes into early May. That's hard on fruit trees, and so they're researching better varieties, and they're, along with what the college is doing, trying to get some research on bloom dates and degree day for choosing different apple varieties. Gardens can also mean many things to many different people. I focused on the fruits and veggie production, but also what a beautiful garden I'm in here too. This is an area of lawn area that they're watering completely from gray water from their house. And so there's big shade trees, there's potted container plants, there's new trees, there's existing trees, there's arbors with plants that are growing, that are very adapted and growing well here. But this is also a gardener that's trying to push the limits a little bit, trying different plants. I saw a dogwood, I see peonies here. Here is Rose of Sharon. We got ivy climbing out. These are some kind of lily bulbs. Dwarf Alberta spruce, lilacs and such growing along. Big old massive shade trees, structures, beautiful green grass. This is really a garden-like setting, and all of this watered, at least the lawn part of it, watered with gray water. So they're also being very responsible and conservative with water. And then you notice again along the edges of the fence where they don't have plantings, they have thick layered mulch through. And as I pan out this way just a little bit, you see big, large open areas. The reason no weeds are growing out there is because they have a thick layer of mulch, and that's areas for further expansion. So the gardener and homeowner just made a comment to me about these poplar trees that were grown by the Yavapai College students. If you notice, as we move distance-wise away from the compost area, that the compost from all the manures and all the old plant scraps and such, the poplar tree that's closest to that is 8-9 feet tall, big and wide, showing dark green foliage. It's growing with its roots right in the compost. So the nutrient value that compost can bring is pretty extensive. The very next tree over showing already some nitrogen deficiency, smaller growth, and as you work your way away from, the trees get smaller and smaller. So just a neat thing the owner pointed out. You want to build a quick sustainable animal structure. You get some hog paneling, you stack your straw bales, you put your posts, attach it all together, and you yourself can have a nice pen for rearing, raising chickens, ducks, etc. I've also seen these structures that can be stuccoed as well, and you end up with a nice straw bale fence.